Good morning, welcome to the programme today. Well, Labour says it will lay an amendment to the Queen's speech on Tuesday calling for a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. Now, that's always been opposed by my first guest, the Business Secretary, but the Chancellor has hinted that he may go down that route. There's also talk of tax cuts as the government struggles with the cost of living crisis. Kwasi Kwarteng joins us now. Thank you. Good to see you this morning. Now, I want to get on to the very important business of the day first, or later. But firstly, just to talk about Eurovision.
Yeah.
We've come second. What is going on?
Well, we had a very good contestant. Sam Ryder did a good job, and he got lots of votes.
And it feels right that Ukraine won, of course.
Well, of course. And I think the important thing I thought was when President Zelensky said that it should be hosted, as is customary in the winning country, and that will be Ukraine. And I look forward to seeing it when it's held there.
And they've talked about it being even in Mariupol. Is that something that the government in the UK would try and support to try and make sure that does
Absolutely.
happen?
I mean, President Zelensky was very clear that it will be hosted in Ukraine, and he mentioned Mariupol, and that's what we hope to see.
And obviously the country might need support from others to make that dream become a reality.
Absolutely. I mean, what we've done is really support Ukraine right through from the beginning of this crisis, and we'll continue to do so.
Now, Ukraine say they've succeeded in pushing Russia out of the second city, Kharkiv. Does our own intelligence support that?
Well, I'm not here to talk about what the war situation is. I think it's been quite encouraging what's happened, and clearly President Putin's initial war aims, have been completely frustrated. But we'll just have to see how the situation evolves.
Do you think it's too far to go to say that Russia could be losing at this point?
No, I wouldn't make any comments on that, and I'm not in a position to do so. We've got an excellent Defence Secretary, we've got excellent intelligence, and those relevant cabinet ministers will have a much clearer view than I do. Mm-hmm. From just reading what I see and looking at the news reports, it's clear to me that Russia's ambitions, their initial war aims, as I've said, have been frustrated. But there could be a long way to go.
And they may be forced to refocus just on the Donbass region in the east of the country.
Yeah, they've already done that. I mean, it was clear that their initial ambition, their initial goal was to take Kiev. That failed. And then they've scaled down their target, their ambition. And as far as I can see, they haven't got their secondary aim either. But it's an evolving situation.
We just heard, just in the last few moments, from Liz Truss about the idea that Finland and potentially Sweden could be applying for NATO membership. Is that something that the UK would like to see?
Well, I think it's really up to Finland and Sweden in terms of NATO membership. That's something for them. They're sovereign countries. And all of NATO will have to take a view on their application.
And what would our view be?
Well, I mean, you'd have to ask Liz Truss. I think she made her comments very clearly. But we would have to just rely on them. We have to see what Finland and Sweden want to do before we can make a response.
OK. Now, the Prime Minister is to visit Belfast this week. Now, that's the first visit since the Assembly elections. What will his message be?
I think his message is very much that the political stability of Northern Ireland is our number one priority as far as Northern Ireland is concerned, and that we should be able to act in a sovereign way. Northern Ireland is as much a part of the United Kingdom as England, Cornwall, the South East, and we are responsible for that as a government, and I'm sure that will be at the core of his message.
Just to, obviously, the DP have said that they don't want to engage in power sharing until parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol are fixed, in their view. And various cabinet ministers, including Liz Truss, including Dominic Raab on this programme, have been very clear that they don't think the protocol is currently working. Does that mean that the UK government is prepared to unilaterally scrap parts of that protocol, even without EU agreement?
Absolutely right. I mean, throughout this whole debate, even before the protocol and the treaty was conceived, we've had a number of people in this country whose presumption has been that the British government is always wrong and that the EU is always right. And that's clearly too simplistic. We've tried to enter into good faith. We've tried to negotiate. We've drawn the treaty. But we've always said, even Article 16 of the protocol itself says that it can be abrogated unilaterally if it's shown not to be working. And clearly, if political stability is our number one priority, and people are saying that they won't go into power sharing if it isn't changed. We have to consider very carefully how we can change it.
That would break international law, though, wouldn't it?
Well, I'm unclear as to this, because clearly Article 16 is part of the protocol itself, and when you read, I did actually take care to read it again just before the programme, it says quite clearly that there's a scope to change it unilaterally. Unilaterally means that we can do that ourselves without having to reach agreement with the EU, and that's in the treaty. The Article 16 is part of the protocol.
Whatever happens, though, there will be a response from the EU if the UK did decide to go down this route. It could mean a trade war, and let's be clear about what that means. That means tariffs. That means things getting more expensive for people in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
Well, let's see what happens. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Well, that's what the EU have said.
And also, I mean, any tariff situation they'd have to go through arbitrators. It's not something that they can just do, willy-nilly, arbitrarily, immediately. They have to go through arbitrators. And, let's rewind a bit. We got into a lot of problems because we simply ruled out the ability to walk away. Article 16 is enshrined. There's a reason for it. It does allow people to act unilaterally. And we've got ultimately to be prepared to invoke it.
Even if it could mean things getting more expensive for people in the UK.
So our number one priority is political stability of Northern Ireland. Now, if many people there, nearly a majority, are saying that they cannot actually have an executive without looking at the protocol again, we have to be prepared to do that. We have to do all we can.
Even if it means goods getting more expensive in the UK.
So the Article 16...
that is the illogical conclusion to what you're saying.
Well, I don't accept the premises of your question. I don't think that they're necessarily going to be able to slap tariffs arbitrarily. I think it'll take a very long time for that process to work out. And as far as I'm concerned, we have absolutely the right to invoke Article 16 and to reopen or re-examine the protocol.
OK. The one thing that I really, I'm slightly confused about, it's pretty clear that yourself and others in government just don't think the protocol is working, and that's because of the checks between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. But what I don't understand is that it was Boris Johnson who negotiated and signed that protocol, and when he did, it was pretty clear that this is a potential consequence of what happened. I just want to play... This is quite a long clip I'm going to play, but it's from an interview I did with Boris Johnson in December 2019, so just before it was signed. And I do think it is worth listening to what he said. Last month, you told businesses in Northern Ireland that they would face no forms, no checks, no barriers of any kind under your Brexit deal. And you also went on to say that if anyone asked them to fill out a form, they should phone you up personally and you'll direct them to throw that form in the bin. Well, how come then that this government document that was leaked this week says that that's not true, that there will be checks and forms? Were you telling the truth?
Yes, I am. And look at what we say in our manifesto, look what we're going to deliver. The deal that we've done with the EU...
So will there be checks?
No, absolutely not. The deal we've done with the EU is a brilliant deal, and it allows us to do all the things that Brexit was about. So it's about taking back control of our borders, money laws, but unlike the previous arrangements, it allows the whole of the UK to come out of the EU, including Northern Ireland, and the only checks that there would be if something was coming from GB via Northern Ireland and was going on to the Republic, then there might be checks at the border into Northern Ireland.
So this document is talking about checks both ways.
And that's wrong, because there won't be checks.
So you're saying that this is wrong, the government's own impact assessment is wrong, your Brexit secretary is wrong, all these people are wrong, and you are right? Yes,
because there's no question of there being checks on goods going NIGB or GBNI.
So they're
part of, if you look at what the deal is, we're part of the same customs territory, and
so pretty clear there. Absolutely no checks. And he said it numerous times.
Yeah.
Did he not understand the deal? Or was he lying to me?
No. He fully understood the deal. But of course, like in anything, you have to see what the actual practice was when it happened.
Nobody else did, though, because the point I make in that interview is that the government's impact assessment, the Brexit secretary, the leaked documents, all of those were saying, yeah, there are going to be checks. He was on his own saying there wouldn't be.
I think the Prime Minister was right to say that we thought it would be a much smoother process.
That's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying there would be light touch checks. He was saying there would be absolutely no checks, and that was wrong, wasn't it?
Well, what's happened now is I think the EU have been unreasonable, frankly. I was just reading a report that they won't use an IT system because it breaks some of their sort of legalist way of thinking. They won't show much flexibility, and that's why we're in the position we're in. The protocol isn't working, and we have to be prepared, and it's an urgent problem, and we have to be prepared to invoke Article 16.
We're in the position we're in because the deal that Boris Johnson signed and negotiated, it was inevitable there was going to be checks on the Irish Sea. So that's why.
I don't think it was inevitable that the EU would be as intransigent or as they have been. And it wasn't inevitable that the people of Northern Ireland would respond in the way they did to the protocol because they've actually experienced it. And they're saying...
The majority on the Northern Ireland Assembly do support the protocol.
And they are saying...
After Sinn Féin got a majority.
Well, they didn't get a majority. They didn't...
They were the largest party. But
they were the largest party.
The majority of Assembly members are from parties that support the protocol.
So I'm not quite sure you're right. I mean, the majority of people on the Assembly are essentially on the unionist side. So they broadly share what the DUP are thinking.
Sorry, the majority on the Assembly are from the union.
So you're right. Sinn Féin has the reason why Sinn Féin are the first minister is because they got a plurality. They got more seats than anyone else, but they don't have a majority. So a lot of the people actually, and they've said this. No,
but not everyone else is unionist. There's other.
No, there are. There's an alliance. There's an alliance. Yeah, right.
As well, right? It's not just Sinn Féin.
No, so it's Sinn Féin, and there's the alliance. And then there are the unionist parties, which added together are more than Sinn Féin.
And the SDLP.
That's right. So, but it's clear to me that without changes to the protocol, you're not going to get an assembly. You're not going to get an executive.
OK.
And that's undermines, the fact you don't get an executive undermines political stability.
Now, Labour are putting... We need to move on. Labour are putting down an amendment to the Queen's speech this week calling for a windfall tax on oil and gas company profits. Will this government support that?
Of course not. I mean, it's very unusual for any government to support opposition amendments to the Queen's speech. So we're going to be opposing that.
I just want to try and work out where you are on the windfall tax on oil and gas companies. This is what you told me a couple of weeks ago. You're very clear. I've never been a supporter of windfall taxes. I have been very clear on that publicly. I think it discourages investment. So that's your position.
Yeah.
Why am I
said
confused?
that to you 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, exactly.
And it's exactly my position today.
Just the reason I'm asking is because this is what Rishi Sunak said on windfall taxes this week. This is the Chancellor. He said, what I want to see is significant investment back in the UK. If that doesn't happen, then no option is off the table.
Yeah.
So who's right then?
They're not contradictory statements. I've said personally that I'm against them, and he's the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's responsible for the budget. He's responsible for tax policy, and he's saying that no option is off the table. And in 12 years in Parliament, I've always heard chancellors, they always say no option is off the table. It would be foolish for any chancellor to rule anything in or out 4 months before the budget is due. So it's entirely reasonable.
You don't want to see a windfall tax?
I wouldn't want to see it. I've always argued against it publicly and privately. But as every chancellor I can remember has said, 4 months before the budget, no option is off the table. It's entirely reasonable.
OK. Now, there are reports in the Sunday Telegraph today that Cabinet Ministers are criticising the Bank of England for failing to control inflation. One reportedly saying it has one job to do to keep inflation at around 2%. It's hard to remember the last time it achieved its target. Do you share their frustration?
So it is a matter of fact that when the Bank of England became independent in 1997, as you know, they had a monetary target, inflation target, 2%. That's true. And inflation's running almost into double digits now. So, you know, that is an issue, clearly. But I think Andrew Bailey's doing a good job in difficult times. These are completely unprecedented times. We've had the COVID pandemic. We've had a huge spike in economic activity after the lockdown restrictions were eased. And then, of course, you've got this war in Europe for the first time in 70 years, with tanks rolling into European territory. So all of these things mean that it's a very difficult time. And I think he's doing a reasonable job. But it's true to say that 2% is part of their mandate. They have to keep it to 2% the inflation.
And they failed on that.
Well, it's been a very difficult time to do that. I think every country in the world pretty much is having inflation running in high single digits, even double digits.
OK. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about some comments made by the Prime Minister this week about working from home. Obviously,
Sure.
many more people working from home as a result of the pandemic, saying that it makes them more productive, that it helps them with flexible working as well, particularly if you've got caring responsibilities. Now, this is what the Prime Minister said about working from home. He said, my experience of working from home is you spend an awful lot of time making another cup of coffee and then, you know, getting up, walking very slowly to the fridge, hacking off a small piece of cheese and then walking very slowly back to your laptop and then forgetting what it was you're doing. Do you share the Prime Minister's assessment?
Well, look, he's making a point very vividly that, you know, people's concentration, his concentration, our concentration, isn't as focused perhaps at home than it would be at work. I think that's an entirely reasonable. I think that's an entirely reasonable thing to say. Many people say they might work much better in a much more focused way in the office.
Do you agree, though, with what he's saying?
Well, I don't know about the details of hacking off a small piece of cheese or anything like that.
Do you think that's maybe a bit more of a reflection about how Boris Johnson works?
I think a lot of people work from home in that way. I mean, we all have our different ways of working from home. But I think the point he's making is that I think the majority actually would be more effective working in the office. And the thing about working in the office is not a doctrinaire thing. I think particularly for young people, if they're trying to learn a profession or learn, you know, about a business, that face-to-face contact is really important. And I think, you know, that's, as business secretary, I'm trying to encourage more people to go back to the office so they can share their experience with other colleagues. OK,
I've just got a couple of things just to finish off with. There's also been a focus on Oxbridge applications this week, and whether, in the words of one Cambridge professor, white private school-educated boys are the new disadvantaged candidates. Now, Nadeem Zahawi, the Education Secretary, said this week Britain should be proud of its private schools and that Oxford and Cambridge shouldn't tilt the system to accept more state school pupils. What's your position on this? So
I think Nadeem makes a good point. I mean, what struck me about the private school debate is that from around the world, people flock to British private schools. It's something which brings money into the country. It's something, they're renowned schools all around the world. And that's something we should be proud of. I don't see any other country, if they had those kinds of institutions, they'd be very proud of having them.
At the same time,
so I wouldn't bash them.
It's not really bashing them to say that actually it's a good thing for more state school pupils to be admitted to Oxford and Cambridge. Statistics show that state school pupils actually outperform their private school peers once they make it to these universities. You know, your old school, Eton, 48 offers. I know that was half on previous years, but that's still an awful lot of people from the top schools going to Oxford and Cambridge.
Look, I think it's a very competitive situation where you have to go, you know, to top schools. Not just Oxford and Cambridge. You know, we tend to obsess about Oxford and Cambridge. We've got lots of fantastic universities, and we should have wide access to them. And I think people should be able to go to them from whatever background they come from.
We are out of time, and I do know I have to let you go. But very quickly, Neil Parish, the former Conservative MP, of course, who resigned after being caught watching porn in the House of Commons. Rumours he might be standing in this by-election.
I'd be very surprised if Neil is standing as an independent. I mean, he's someone who was very loyal to the party. He was an MEP for many years. He was an MP for 12 years. I'd be very surprised if he did that.
OK. Thank you very much for being on the programme today.
Thank you.
Mr Kwarteng there, Kwasi Kwarteng.